It's my turn. Oh, sorry.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. We will begin our webinar here in just a minute while everyone is joining on here. So we will get going here shortly. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Data-Driven Using Analytics to Recruit and Hire webinar, hosted by KRT and LinkUp. My name is Molly Mosley, and I will be your moderator, making sure we are providing useful information and keeping our industry experts on task. So welcome. A couple of things before we get started. In listen-only mode. So please use your control panel for any questions or comments throughout. We will at the end be taking questions. So just use your control panel. Our industry experts will cover a ton of information. So at a very high level, we'll discuss what the current labor market looks like and the challenges it presents for you as a recruiter, how to set yourself up for success in a data-driven industry. We'll also cover specific data-driven marketing tactics to implement, and we'll cover performance-based advertising and success stories. And lastly, follow our conversation or tweet using hashtag #TADataChat. For those of you not familiar with KRT or LinkUp, I thought I would provide a little background information and also a little information on how we decided to join up and create this webinar. So for KRT, for over 4 decades, they've served as one of the world's leading recruitment advertising agencies. And today, they're focused on delivering data-driven marketing tactics and marketing-leading analytics into the talent acquisition space. So for LinkUp, we're on the publisher side, and we feature more than 3 million jobs direct from 30,000 company career sites. So with that, we deliver employers qualified candidates at a low cost through pay-per-click recruiting. So KRT and LinkUp, we've had a very strong agency-publisher relationship since really LinkUp emerged in 2009. And our really common denominator is we both strive to deliver the highest quality of candidate flow to our customers and leveraging data to do so. With that being said, let me introduce our industry experts, and their unique viewpoints and industry knowledge really complement each other tremendously, and we hope you're able to take away some insightful information today. So we have Eric Howell, VP of Operations at KRT, and Toby Dayton, President and CEO of LinkUp. And they're going to be providing their industry expertise on using data and analytics to recruit and hire top talent. Welcome, Eric and Toby.
Thanks, Molly.
So let me give you a little background on Eric here first, and then we'll talk a little bit about Toby, and then we'll dive right on in. So Eric has over 11 years of digital recruitment marketing and analytics, and he really brings a wealth of knowledge from the agency perspective. One thing that's really cool that he brought to California is he's the creator of the Green Belt certification. And lastly, his claim to fame is that he used to be a competitor here. Hey, Eric.
Hello.
And then we've got Toby. he has also been in the industry for a very long time, close to 15 years. And over the last several years, he's been a key contributor on Bloomberg using LinkUp's clean data. And his claim to fame, and where he spends all of his spare time, which I'm probably exaggerating on, is with some intense games of Catan. So welcome again, Toby.
Thank you.
All right. So that's kind of our introduction, our agenda for it, so we can kind of kick things off here. So I thought we would start with, to better understand and leverage your own recruiting data, you really need to take a step back and look at the labor market as a whole. And ask yourself, what are the current marketing conditions, labor market conditions that might create recruiting challenges for my company? So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Toby. And can you walk through our current labor market and kind of explain what it looks like today?
Sure, and thanks, Molly, and thanks to everybody for joining us today. We look forward to a good webinar and some good engagement with questions at the end. So with that, as Molly said, I'll provide a little bit of a backdrop on what's going on in the labor market these days. And as Molly said, we've been leveraging our data in our search engine for about 6+ years now to not only assess current conditions in the labor market, but also make forecasts as to job growth in future periods. And so with all the news that's been going on, it probably makes sense to start with a little bit of a backdrop on the overall economy. And with certainly the global news last week with Brexit and a lot of the attention the Fed has been paying to the economy and GDP growth and the labor market in particular, I'll summarize that by saying essentially what I heard an economist characterize the broader economy last week by saying that it was the U.S. economy in particular is what he called a very healthy tortoise rather than a sick hare. And I think in a lot of ways it's a pretty good analogy. We are in a slower growth environment, but having said that, I think the economy is certainly showing signs of being very steady, quite resilient to a lot of the turbulence going on around the world, and certainly continuing to plod forward with pretty decent, consistent growth rates. And in a lot of ways, I think that's pretty much the exact same characterization we'd make about the condition of the labor market. I think it is very healthy. It is certainly booming. The job growth is come down a little bit, but I think that is primarily driven by the fact that we really are in a period of full employment. And so when you look at a little bit of declining job growth, looking at May's numbers in particular that came in below expectations, I think that's a pretty good sign, not necessarily of a weakening labor market, but the fact that we really are in a full employment environment and that we can expect monthly job gains that might be a little bit less than what we've seen in the last year or two. Again, because of being in such a tight labor market, it's just hard to keep at that aggressive pace of adding monthly job gains each month. So when we look at sort of what's happened over the past couple of years and going back, it really is, it's really quite clear that we are in a very, very strong labor market, and job gains have been incredibly consistent for over the last 5 years or so. We've actually had about 70 consecutive months of monthly net job gains, which is really quite remarkable and in a lot of ways quite unprecedented how long and consistent we've had that kind of consistent gains. When you look at some of the broader statistics, it's also really, I think, quite evident that we are absolutely in a period of full employment. Wages are rising. Unemployment continues to be at right around 5%. Layoffs are incredibly low, and probably most importantly, I think, and the strongest evidence that we're in that full employment environment is the fact that wages have really started to climb up. And I think in a lot of ways, when you look back in the sort of post-recession period, what had been frustrating economists and working people and just the broader sort of U.S. economy was the fact that wages were just not rising. And it took a long time for that to start to materialize, and in the last year or so, I think they're across the board have started to see pretty broad-based, steady gains in wages, which is absolutely a key indicator of being in that full employment environment. So in that kind of an environment, obviously we want to keep the focus on you and what people in HR departments and in talent acquisition are facing in their day-to-day jobs. And so what we really look at, and from our perspective, there are really about 4 phases of being in a full employment environment. And we started to see this process really start to take shape, again, probably about 12 to 18 months ago, where positions were starting to take longer to fill, recruiting costs were starting to go up as the labor market tightened and it became harder to fill those positions. Companies were having to spend more dollars to source candidates and get completed applications in for their positions. And I think where we are right now is really in that 3rd stage where salaries and wages are really starting to increase across the board. We started to see this very early on in certain sectors of the economy. Transportation probably started to rise the soonest and the fastest coming out of the recession back in 2011 and 12. Healthcare and technology have I think we're sort of next in line. And now what we've seen in that last year or so is that those wage increases have really started to take hold across the entire U.S. economy in virtually every sector of the economy. And then once wages continue to go up and those positions continue to remain unfilled, you really start to move into that 4th stage where businesses really have to start to adjust how they do their business, how they are continuing to grow and succeed in their strategic business objectives. They're having to make decisions based on being in a really tight labor market where you can't just fill positions and you have to start to do different kinds of things, and we're starting to see more and more evidence that is taking place. So in terms of how you as HR professionals and talent acquisition specialists can respond to this kind of an environment, there really are a number of things that we would certainly point to as steps to take. Certainly as recruiting costs go up, the key is to make sure, number one, that those cost increases are actually legitimate cost increases, and that it isn't just a function of media or vendors demanding more and more spend, that it's actually looking at the data behind those increases and making sure that those cost increases are justified, and certainly in lots of cases they are, and certainly it shouldn't be surprising that those recruiting costs are going up in this type of environment, but you certainly want to verify that. And then I think secondarily, the key point is to make sure that those budget increases are continuing to deliver a strong value proposition. And while applicant costs and cost per hire metrics might be going up, certainly that shouldn't necessarily be the red flag that the value the value proposition is going away or going down. I think what is key is to look at benchmarking data, and so relative to other sources, is the ROI that you're getting from particular sources, is that continuing to perform against benchmarks relative to other providers? And I think that really is the key, and again, data plays a critical role in assessing that.
So I'm just going to jump in here quick. Thanks, Toby, for providing us a little color around our current economy and whether we're in full employment or not. In case you missed it, KRT and LinkUp did publish an email series that we sent 4 different emails out with a bunch of different content and resources. So specific around labor market data and how we reach full employment, we do have some helpful information that you can download available at linkup.com/data series resources. So just to keep kind of things moving, Toby, now that you gave us a little background information and some compelling stats stating that in your opinion, that we have reached full employment, what other data should employers and recruiters and talent acquisition specialists really take into account?
Yeah, it's a good transition, and so really going back to the other points about how critical data is in assessing that ROI, segueing a little bit to data in general, there is just no question that the use of data and analytics in and around business is just exploding of late, and it's not a surprise to anybody, but it really is staggering when you look at the amount of data that is being made available in the world today. And that's not just generally speaking in terms of broad base. It also has obviously very, very significant implications for HR, and I'm sure that is not lost on anyone listening today. In a recent survey, 82% of people who work in HR think that people analytics are important. Again, not surprising probably to anybody, but the challenge there is translating that belief into action. And so again, going back to another Deloitte study, 75% of companies that believe analytics are important, but only 8% of them were actually strong in that. So again, I think there is a huge opportunity there to see improvement there and to start making investments in actually turning that belief into action. And then again, just going through as kind of a number of statistics, more than 60% of the companies are now investing in analytic tools to help make their HR departments more data-driven. So clearly there is a lot of investment that's going on there. And even beyond basic analytics is really the ability to start to leverage data and analytics to start making predictive decisions and forecasts and that are going to guide business decisions. So if you look at just sort of the basic level of analytics, it's sort of getting an accurate picture of what's happening today. The next step in that evolution is starting to use data to make accurate forecasts about what things are going to look like down the road. And that really, again, is where there is a significant amount of opportunity and where most companies are now starting to focus their attention. And again, I think that there's no doubt that the evidence is there that the investments in there have and will continue to pay off. If you start to look at what kinds of things result from those investments in data and analytics, and particularly predictive analytics, you can start to see very, very significant ROIs in terms of sales growth and profitability and efficiency and productivity per employee. The numbers are really, really quite strong in pointing to the importance of making those kinds of investments. So it's not surprising then, too, that when you start to look at companies that are making those kinds of decisions and investments, that one of the fastest growing job titles in our search engine over the last year or so has been data science positions, and it really has been really fascinating to watch growth. And this is a map of the U.S. of where the data scientist positions are in the highest demand across the U.S. And again, this growth rate in this area has been significant. And then even beyond just sort of that generic, going back to this, the forecasts are that the demand is expected to continue well into the future for this position, not surprisingly. So beyond just sort of the generic data scientist job, one of the other positions that we've been tracking is HR analytics. And so again, we've started to see significant growth in positions for bringing in those data scientists and analytics people into the HR departments. So going back again to sort of the evolution of the use of data and analytics, the goal is, and the long-term trends there are to move beyond just sort of operational and tactical data and analytics, but to start to migrate the focus on strategic objectives and then predictive analytics. And so, again, that is really something that I think will be a trend looking forward as data and analytics continue to migrate into this area. And just to highlight a couple of case studies where we've seen that happen, and I'll run through these really quickly, but we had a conversation actually last month with a talent acquisition specialist at H&R Block, and they were going through and wrapping up a study. They had looked at all of their hires from 2015, and they were analyzing the productivity of those hires in the form of completed tax returns. And then they were looking at what were the defining attributes or characteristics of those hires, and then what were the factors that led to those hires, and then obviously rolling their findings into their hiring plans this fall as they begin their next wave of hires. So again, a pretty interesting example of companies that are looking at sort of current situation of their hires from last year, looking at performance, and then translating that into actionable information that they can use to improve their business. There was one other example. We are currently in the process of working with the University of Washington and their Center for Health Workforce Studies. And they've been actually using our entire data set and analyzing job descriptions in the healthcare field. And what they're trying to do is predict what kinds of jobs are going to be emerging in the healthcare industry in the future. And it has just been a fascinating study to be a part of, and watching them conduct their work and sharing it as they share their findings with us. And essentially, and again, this is a gross oversimplification, but what they're essentially doing is that they are analyzing hundreds of thousands of job descriptions over the last 3 years in healthcare, and they're looking at individual phrases that appear in a job description, and then watching over time as those phrases in a job description turn into bullet points, and then those bullet points might turn into a larger paragraph, and eventually that requirement of that job or that task of that job becomes a full-time job with that in the job title itself. And so they're really, again, trying to use a wealth of data to try to predict job titles that don't even exist today, just by looking at the rich content that is available in job descriptions. So again, a fascinating example of using data for some really, really interesting uses. So that's kind of a lot of ground to cover. I'll just probably wrap it up with a little bit of a simple conclusion, and that really is, so again, a little bit of simplified advice boils down to collecting and analyzing all the data you can, and figuring out what kind of data you have access to, where it is coming from, and making sure that you have access to all of the data that you need to start making good business decisions. And in terms of that, I guess the last piece of advice, and again, it's quite obvious, but I think it is really important to emphasize, is that to make good business decisions, you really do have to know what it is you're trying to achieve, and it is setting those goals and then executing against those specific goals. So in the context of talent acquisition and HR, again, not surprisingly, it really comes down to looking at things like applicants, cost per applicant, cost per quality applicant, and so it really, every unique company and employer obviously sets their specific goals of what they're trying to achieve. The key really is to establish that goal and then execute against that, and track and measure the results against that goal.
Thanks, Toby. A couple more resources too to check out again on linkup.com/data series resources. And that was a really good segue, Toby, to something I want Eric to take the lead on is, with the transitioning of setting up for success, one way to do that is to educate yourself. Eric, are you there?
Oh, hey Molly, sorry, you guys cut off. We just sent you a text, but it looks like you're back.
Oh, yeah, Yeah, sorry about that. I was just kind of segueing up to you, saying that, Toby talked a little bit about setting up for success, which data-driven marketing tactics is a perfect introduction to that. So if you want to kind of take things over, sorry about that weird glitch. I'm not sure what's happening there, but let's turn it over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks, Molly, and thanks, Toby. Great explanation of challenges of full employment and how to set yourself up for success by going through various things to track. And so in segueing into now what we're going to look at would be some data-driven marketing tactics. And for the purposes of this webinar, we're going to look at these 4 buckets. And, for this series, we chose data-driven tactics because when there is a huge challenge to source the best talent out there, when you're using data, you can better target into specific candidate audiences, almost get surgical in the way that you are sourcing talent. So this allows you to better leverage your recruiting investments to find that top talent and meet your hiring goals. So these being the 4 buckets, if you look at the top 2, we'll go through each one quickly. We don't have too much time, but I'll definitely give you enough details to understand exactly what they are and how they're performing for other organizations, and hopefully you'll find out if it's something right for your organization. Doesn't mean all of them would work, but maybe one of them is a perfect fit. The top 2 really get into targeting passive candidates, whether it's building brand awareness. There's going to be some direct response in there, but it is largely used to go after that very attractive passive candidate audience. And then the bottom 2 that we'll get into are going to be looking more at job seekers. So the next slide, we're going to start with remarketing. And remarketing is going after an audience that has already expressed some form of interest into your job opportunities. So whether you're an organization that gets 4,000 visitors to your career site or your ATS, or you get 44,000 visitors to your web properties, it's pretty consistent that only about 10% of your visitors are going to end up applying for a job. That leaves 90%, give or take, of your visitors, your candidates, researching job opportunities that are leaving your site and going off and doing whatever it is. They leave for a variety of reasons, but this audience is primed to retarget to, knowing that they've already seen your open job opportunities. So this is an opportunity to remarket to them. And we're going to look at a few of the remarketing opportunities. If you go to the next slide, there are 5. So we're not going to look at all of them in detail, but I'll walk you through some examples to help explain exactly what this is. On the next slide, this actually happened to me a couple of weeks ago, so it's a perfect example of remarketing in action. This would be site retargeting. And so a few weeks ago, me and a couple of colleagues went out to Chicago to go to a TA Tech conference. And when we returned back to the office, we all got an email that asked us to fill out a survey to tell us what we thought of the conference. And so that's a screenshot of the email on the left, and I thought, yeah, I have some ideas. So I clicked on it. I filled out the survey, which was hosted by SurveyMonkey. And then the next day, as I get onto my LinkedIn profile, there is an ad for SurveyMonkey. Now, this is a little different. It's not recruitment specific, but because SurveyMonkey collected my data, then it knew that, I left and it thought, hey, this guy filled out a survey. Maybe he needs to submit a survey himself. Maybe not, but we're going to keep our brand top of mind with this person in that case. So on the next slide, we'll get more specific into how this is working in the recruiting world. So it doesn't necessarily have to always be people visiting your site. You can actually retarget to people that are performing search queries that match your open job opportunities. So in this case, it'd be a healthcare example. You can set up audience segments based on people searching for nurse jobs. It's a very broad job category, so you could even get more specific, and you could set up target audiences and segment them for something as specific as neonatal nurse practitioner jobs. And on the next slide, you'll see an example. Chipotle is doing this. So Chipotle has thousands of locations across the United States, needs to hire people for their restaurants. And if you keep in mind that 90% of the people that come to their career site are not applying for a job, but they have some type of interest, that's a perfect audience to retarget. So you take the people that are doing the research, they're typing in the search queries that match the open opportunities that Chipotle has. There are people visiting the Chipotle site but not applying for the job, and hence there's the retargeting ad, same place, LinkedIn, my profile, there's the display ad for Chipotle. On the next slide, you'll see example of the various banner ads that were used in this retargeting campaign. And Chipotle used an extra layer of detail, or used an extra layer of data to really focus the advertising. And each ad got location specific. So as people searched or visited the website, Chipotle knew where they were coming from. And therefore, as somebody left the site and went on and did their thing, the ads that they would see would be specific to where they lived. So if they lived in Denver, they saw an ad that said Denver in it. If they lived in Cincinnati, it would say Cincinnati, and so on and so forth. The results have been incredible from a retargeting standpoint, especially when you compare it to traditional display advertising. CTRs increased by 57% over traditional advertising. There was a 29% increase in returning visitors to their career site. The click-to-apply conversions performed 38% better than other passive audience marketing tactics. And then the cost per applications ended up coming out 81% lower than other traditional display advertising. So the site retargeting was something that Chipotle was able to use in a way that helped them target a passive audience with a better return on investment than the traditional way of advertising in a display network. So moving from site targeting, we're going to look at lookalike campaigns. Now, lookalike campaigns are actually specific to Facebook. This is a tactic that you can do on Facebook, and I'm sure that everybody on this call, maybe not everybody, but a lot of people on this webinar have probably done Facebook advertising in the past, and there's a good chance you probably did not get the results that you were looking for. It might have even bombed. But lookalike campaigns have been a game changer for Facebook, and they end up having much better results in the way that they can target very specific audiences. So lookalike campaigns are exactly what it is. These are campaigns that target new audiences, unlike site retargeting that we just looked at, target candidates that have already been to your career site. Lookalike campaigns target a new audience that has never been to your career site. However, these people fit the demographic and psychographic of your existing employees. You can build out these custom audiences in these three various ways. You can upload a list of your current existing employees into the Facebook user interface, and it will create that custom audience for you to target in an advertising campaign. You could place a Facebook pixel on your career site and build data that way in order to build out the custom audience segments. Or you can use your Facebook page if you have one, and if you have a large fan base, use the information from that to build out lookalike campaigns to target with advertising. So DaVita is getting great results from Facebook lookalike campaigns. Here are a couple examples of the ads that show up, and in large part, it's a huge mobile advertising campaign. And these show up in desktop as well, but the amount of people who access Facebook from their mobile device is monstrous. DaVita has to hire registered nurses at numerous locations across the U.S., and up to 100 locations every month could be labeled as hard to fill. So we use these campaigns to do two things: build brand awareness in those markets that were hard to fill, and also create a call to action that asks people to apply now or come to a hiring event. So in doing the lookalike campaigns, the click-through rates increased by 614% over traditional Facebook advertising. There's something about advertising to friends of friends of friends of friends of friends. It just works better. And for DaVita, it's now become one of their go-to marketing tactics for the various hiring events they're having in these markets. And they are still currently running over 20 lookalike campaigns for approximately 100 locations, those hard-to-fill locations. The last remarketing tactic that we'll look at is going to be remarketing to your talent pool. Everybody has, not everybody, but a good portion of people are now have some form of a talent community, whether it's through their ATS or some type of CRM tool. And this one probably, I would say, is obviously is a common thing. I mean, this one makes the most sense, and everybody knows that if they have a talent pool, they should be remarketing to those folks. But it's amazing how many organizations actually do not remarket to their own database of existing interested candidates, whether they've just filled out a short form or they fully applied for a job in the past. And we could probably go on for an entire afternoon on various ways to target these talent pools and the various job categories that they fit in. So in order to save time, we'll just go through one example. And on the next slide, CH2M does a great job in the fact that they have various ways to target their talent pool, but one way that has worked very well for them is that they've created a very impressive newsletter that goes out to their interested candidates from their talent pool every single month. And not only does it go to that talent pool, but it goes to existing employees, it goes to alumni, it goes to a wide range of people that have a connection to CH2M. And in doing that, they've created a real sense of community, and they get a strong response rate in sending out this newsletter every month. One way of many ways to retarget to a large candidate database.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing all those success stories, Eric. Those are really, really interesting. Again, some more helpful resources. KRT actually put together a really great remarketing piece that you can get on our landing page, again, at linkup.com/data series resources. So we're going to shift gears a little bit. Eric walked through some really good success stories for retargeting and various recruiting marketing tactics. But now I want to talk a little bit about all the different areas of performance-based advertising. So Toby, why don't you kind of go through and explain to our audience the different types that they should be trying, looking into?
Yeah, thanks, Molly. So just a quick sort of overview on performance-based advertising, which is exactly as it sounds. It is essentially paying for advertiser only when an action is performed and the results are achieved. And so obviously pay-per-click is the most common form of performance-based advertising today, and that really is just as Molly said early on in providing an overview of LinkUp, we are a performance-based pay-per-click advertising solution. So when advertisers run campaigns with us, they only pay when a candidate clicks on a job. But there are other forms of performance-based advertising that are starting to migrate into the industry, and those really focus on pay-per-applicant, and the inevitable evolution of that will move into pay-per-hire and pay-per-quality hire. So again, these are trends that are well underway, and I think are inevitable over time. That performance-based advertising, just as it has really turned the traditional advertising world upside down, the same thing is happening in the recruitment space, and for good reasons, because the results are really evident that performance-based advertising really does lower cost and improve results. So to run through, similar to the way Eric did, we'll run through an example of that, of performance-based advertising, and focus on Harris Teeter, which is a large supermarket chain in South Carolina with about 240 stores. They have about 25,000 employees, and they are just wrapping up their campaign for the second quarter. So we're going to focus on results from May. And what they were running for with open positions, their campaign in May focused on a variety of different positions across all of their locations, focused on things like bakers and personal shoppers, cashiers, butchers, and stockers. So a variety of positions there, and the results were really quite impressive. They were very, very pleased with the results, and have expanded their campaigns for the remainder of the year and increased the positions, which is great for us, obviously. But it's fun when you get these kind of results in, and you get the kind of feedback that we were able to see from Harris Teeter. They had 600 applicants at a low cost of $6 per applicant. They made 30 hires in May from their campaign at a cost of about $130 per hire. And those, both the cost per applicant and cost per hire metrics, were well below their threshold in terms of cost. So they were very, very pleased with the results there. And again, going back to the theme of using data and evaluating sources and ROI on spend, these are the kind of metrics that are absolutely critical to start to look at and benchmark against, and be able to evaluate media sources, particularly in a performance-based environment. Again, establishing those goals and then tracking results against them. So again, just another quick case study there on performance-based advertising.
And another thing that is on the rise, which definitely falls into KRT's wheelhouse, LinkUp does support programmatic, but this is definitely something that Eric should share a little bit more information on in regards specifically to KRT's PPC portfolio manager and how to leverage it. So Eric, do you want to take things over?
Yeah, thanks, Molly. Programmatic is, I don't want to say we saved the best for last, but it's as data-centric as it gets. I mean, data is the essence of programmatic recruitment advertising, and if you don't believe me, I mean, just look at this definition of what programmatic is. Programmatic recruitment ad buying encompasses an array of technologies to automate the buying and placement of job openings on a predetermined network of job-related websites on a pay-per-click or pay-per-app basis. Programmatic ad buying maximizes targeting efficiency by continually optimizing placements for the highest conversion rate at the job level. When I look at the definition, it's to a T exactly what it is, but you have to read it a few times. So we basically spell it out for you right here. In layman's terms, programmatic, you're using real-time data you're automating the buying process, and you're putting that with some smart people, and you're going to get PPC magic. And that's what programmatic recruitment advertising is. Programmatic job advertising unleashes 3 data-driven factors. The first factor is not one site, many sites. You know, a lot of us in the past, traditional PPC advertising is sponsoring jobs on one job site, maybe 2, maybe 3. When you implement a programmatic job campaign, you open it up to several sites and essentially turn the web into a huge help wanted sign. So this is a way to get in front of quality candidates, no matter where they live, where they work, where they play on the web, you can get in front of them. Number 2, programmatic uses rules-based tactics to advertise jobs equally. Now, in the traditional approach to PPC advertising, it's nearly impossible to micromanage performances and budgets at the job level. And therefore, you get a lot of jobs that are easier to fill, that can soak up those clicks and the budgets and leave a huge gap or a huge hole for the jobs that really need them, those harder to fill jobs. The programmatic approach uses data, not humans, to micromanage the activities at a job level, and in doing so, it evenly distributes the investments and the visibility of your jobs across all of them, not just a few select jobs. And number 3, real-time optimization with completed application data. So here's how this works. You've got your programmatic job engine. We call ours the PPC Portfolio Manager. And your jobs could be segmented in ways that could be like the dark blue could be your hardest to fill jobs, medium blue is hard to fill, and then the light blue somewhat hard to fill. And then the white jobs, these are jobs you don't need advertising help with because they're super easy to fill. They're getting enough applications organically. They don't need to be in an ad campaign. From there, the jobs are distributed to a network of job sites participating in the PPC platform. And then from there, you receive completed app data. And that completed app data is then funneled back to the programmatic engine where it can make real-time optimizations to your campaigns. It can remove jobs because they received enough applications. It can increase the CPCs if needed be. It can add new jobs that need the support. Whatever it needs, you can set the rules and you can set those programs up so that your jobs are getting as many apps as you need. On the next slide, you'll see kind of an example of this is a real client with real data that in the traditional approach, you had not just one location. I mean, Atlanta is killing everybody else, but not just Atlanta, but all these locations are soaking up way too many of the clicks and way too much of the budget. And in doing so, I mean, if you're spreading out $10,000 equally on the left and then $10,000 on the right side, the programmatic approach is able to identify which jobs need it, to spread it out evenly, never letting one location go rogue and eat up the budget. But you can set those rules like don't spend more than $185 for each job. Don't get more than 300 clicks. Don't get more than 40 apps, so on and so forth. And so you're better, you can the distribution among your various jobs are better in a programmatic approach. And a funny thing happens on the next slide when you use data to micromanage the activity of all of your jobs. It creates a competitive marketplace. It understands which jobs prevents things from going rogue, and in doing so, CPAs naturally come down. I mean, this client was spending $20 per app for every app that they received, which means that your investments can't go as far as you need them to. But that was the status quo. So we thought, oh, $20, great. that's the benchmark, and we worked from that. And it was going up. It was getting more competitive and harder to compete for a lower CPA. You enter in data and use data as the driving force behind your campaigns, and the CPAs come down, way down in this case. Down now, the client's paying $4 per app, so the same investment goes so much further and can really help out those locations that need it. So programmatic is new. It's brand new. It's been around for less than 2 years. And we do a lot of educating on what it is. LinkUp does a lot of educating on what it is. And it's not new in the consumer world. It is because it's maybe 5 years old, but the consumer side of the world, they've already been using the programmatic approach for quite some time. And as you know, the recruitment industry follows what the consumer side does first. And over 67% of the ads bought in the consumer world are done programmatically. Only 2% of the job ads in the recruiting industry are purchased programmatically. And that is going to change, and we will see the same trends as the consumer world did, in where you could see as much as 50, 60% of job ads purchased programmatically by the year 2020. And it will probably happen faster than that.
Any last-minute things about programmatic on your end, Eric? We do have a lot of questions coming in regards to programmatic that we'll definitely circle back to. And also, again, more resources here. But any kind of last information on programmatic other than people need to learn it, try it, it's the future?
Yeah, you know, I'm more interested in getting to those questions because I could go on and on about programmatic. Usually we will spend hours talking about it, so if we want to get to the question, I'm sure I'll be able to sum up some additional things with it.
Perfect. So before we get into the questions, I just wanted to kind of highlight some of the key takeaways. Toby and Eric covered a ton of information. So we have been recording this webinar, so we'll send out the recording link and the presentation. So if you missed something, you'll be able to use that as a resource to go back to. And of course, if we don't get to your questions specifically, someone from LinkUp or KRT will reach out to you directly and answer those questions. So key takeaways. Employment presents HR challenges. So understand the market and understand how it will only help you with you and what you need to do as an organization to really kind of meet those kind of industry standards. Also, you have to be incorporating data to succeed and deliver results. Track things, try new sources, be able to set internal benchmarks to kind of take, and run up the ladder to show that you are driving success. The future of data will be predictive. So what are you doing now, and what should you be doing, or what should you be implementing next year? Also, data-driven marketing is your secret weapon. So you are your internal advocate, so use it to your advantage. And lastly, one thing that I don't have on here is what I kind of mentioned earlier, learn about programmatic. It has been around for a while. It's new to the recruiting space. But definitely educate yourself on it and be willing to try it, because that is definitely where the industry is moving. All your resources, again, will be on our landing page. And now I'm going to open it up to questions. But before I do that, thank you, Eric, and thank you, Toby, for sharing all of your insights on today's webinar. I really hope everyone in the audience, can take away some of the information and kind of implement it into your strategy. So thank you both.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So we are almost at that 1 hour mark. So I'm only going to be able to kind of do a couple questions. Again, I'll reiterate, we will follow up with you directly if we don't get to yours specifically. One question that's probably more geared to Toby that came in is around kind of the job numbers. So it reads, the job numbers in recent months have come in below economist estimations. So any sense on what is driving this or what this means for full employment?
Yeah, it is a good question. I touched on it a little bit early on, but not in a ton of great depth. I do think that numbers have come down this year. The average monthly net job gains have come down from where they were last year and the year before. And again, I think that rather than that being an indicator of a slowing economy or a labor market that is slowing down, I actually think it is really much more a factor of us being in that full employment environment where job gains just are not going to be as high as they were when we were in a higher unemployment rate and job gains were happening faster. So again, I think while the headline may seem like it's disappointing numbers, I think that that's much more a sign of that good, steady, healthy tortoise approach to job gains.
Great. As I mentioned, we do have quite a few programmatic questions coming in, so Eric, I'm going to pump this one to you. And my apologies, I think we're having some audio issues, so we'll just kind of hopefully bear with us here and get that sorted out. But Eric, the question reads, for programmatic, it looks like you're capturing apply data from the ATS. How exactly do you capture apply data from the ATS to optimize your PPC campaigns in real time?
It's a great question. Data, as Toby mentioned, you have to set yourself up for success, and part of setting yourself up for success with programmatic is going to be placing tracking tags in specific areas to make sure that you're capturing the data you need to optimize your campaigns. So one of those places is going to be the completed apply page, which is typically the thank you page of the application process. As long as that tag is there in your ATS, which we successfully place all the time, that data, when it's captured, is then fed into the engine in real time, and that is how the campaigns are optimized.
Great. And kind of related, Eric, aligns advertising. Can you give a specific example of a rule that you use in programmatic?
Yeah, you bet. There are some really cool rules that you can place. Some of the simple ones would be, let's say on average you've been able to figure out that you need 30 apps to make a hire for a specific job family. So for those jobs, you would create a rule that says once my job hits 30 apps, whether it's through organic or through sponsored campaigns, please remove my job from the feed so that it's removed from the sponsored campaign, therefore not spending $1 more on another app. It could be 40 apps for another job family, 50 apps, but this is how you would set a rule in order to control any of those jobs going rogue. Another rule would be don't sponsor my jobs within the first 10 days unless it only has 10 applications. So if it has less than 10 applications in 10 days, then please add it to the sponsored campaign. And the reason you would do something like that is because maybe this job is going to get enough apps within the first 10 days of it opening that we don't need to sponsor it, and therefore it knows that, well, wait a minute, it didn't get the apps we need, so let's go ahead and add this to the campaign. And that's that micromanaging activity that the data does for you. And I mean, it's impossible to do that as a human being. You would be up 24/7 trying to manage something like that.
Yeah. Great. Thanks, Eric. We are about to hit that 1 hour mark. I'm going to take one more question, and we'll circle back with everybody else. Thank you for all the engagement. These questions are really great. This one is kind of going with tracking, which Toby talked a little bit about. The question is, in terms of performance-based advertising, how can we move from tracking applicants to tracking quality applicants?
Yeah, it is. We're starting to see more and more employers that are running campaigns with us that are benchmarking quality applicants. metric. And the short answer, a case-by-case basis, each company has seen this across different companies. They define a quality applicant, and it's even more broad dispersion across industries. It really it goes back to looking at hiring data and figuring out what types of hires have been successful and what kinds of applicants are actually leading to interviews and eventually hires, and then looking for more of those quality applicants. So it might be degree-based or certification or years of experience. There are different metrics there that every company has of what kinds of applicants are going to make it into that process, eventually leading to a hire. And so it's a little bit of an oversimplified answer, but it really is on an employer by employer basis there. Applicants.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. We are out of everyone for attending the. Encourage you to join hashtag #TA. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Toby. And I hope everyone has a wonderful day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.